Again, I welcome Kirk Herbstreit. My name is Nicole Kraft. I am the director of the Sports and Society Initiative here at Ohio State. I'm also a professor of journalism specifically, but I do teach sports media here. I'm going to be teaching sports media relations, sports journalism, and we are just thrilled to be able to offer a variety of programming to help people better understand and kind of process the intersection of sport and society. With us today also is my teaching assistant, Colin Gannan, who is the president of our student broadcasting group, Scarlet and Gray Sports Radio. They broadcast all of the games that we offer at Ohio State, and we're just thrilled that he can be here to help us navigate questions. Well, Kirk, we'll just start with the obvious. This is a weird time, and normally you and I would not be doing this kind of virtual call. We've been talking about you coming in to class. How are things going for you amid the COVID-19 kind of situation we're in?
Trying to make it as good as we can. We have 4 boys, 2 of which are freshmen in college, and we were actually on spring break when in the middle of the spring break, the schedules happened to align. There are 3 different schools, and they happen to have the same spring break. So we were like, man, what an incredible opportunity to get all 6 together again. And then in the middle of that, it was like right around March 20th, 21st, we just came back home to Nashville and pretty much have been here since then, probably like a lot of people. Just in my case, as a parent with 4 boys, 4 now that are teenagers, we just have tried to make this more of a blessing. The fact that we get bonus time with our oldest 2, and they're doing since spring break ended, they've been now doing homeschooling, and like what we're doing right now, they're working with teachers and having tests, and the teachers are doing the best job that they can through that. And we're trying to have movie night and just trying to create routine and just trying to turn this thing into a positive the best we can and enjoy the time that we have together. And just like I told you earlier, just trying to figure out where we're headed. I just follow the rules that they set. If they say to do this is unprecedented, uncharted territory. I try to stay out of the politics of it, which has been very annoying to watch people arguing about this when we should just be focused on what this virus is and how we can adapt and overcome it and come back stronger, which I think we will eventually, but it's just a matter of when that'll be.
Absolutely. We opened this up to questions beforehand, and I'm sure you can imagine we got received quite a few about college football and what we're going to be doing about college football this year. I'm not sure if you're any more, in the know or prophetic, but what are your thoughts about what the potential is, what the struggles will be, and what will be the ramifications if we don't come back this year?
Well, first I'll give you a quick little story. Like I just told you about that spring break trip. We came back, and you're turning on the TV and you're listening to all of a sudden the pandemic, and you're thinking, man, this is very serious. Well, I happened to do an interview with a guy named Ian Fitzsimmons, who I used to do a local radio show there in Columbus with for a few years. And he and I are buddies, and I was on ESPN radio with him, but we were just kind of talking like you and I are right now. And I was just kind of thinking out loud, like, man, not only did we lose March Madness, not only are we missing opening day, which was the day I was talking to him for baseball. I said, dude, there's a real chance we may not have football in the fall. And he's like, what? I go, no, I'm serious. I mean, how can they, without a vaccine, how can they greenlight legally teams and players to come back in the locker rooms together and fans in the stadiums? And I was the first one to say that. And oh my gosh, like I wasn't like hoping for that or predicting that. I was just more thinking out loud. And then the way it was reported was, to me, very unfair. It was like I made a declaration, there will be no football in the fall, which is the furthest thing from what I had done. I was just, like I said, more thinking out loud. Now, that was 3 weeks ago. Now, after 3 weeks and talking to a lot of the influencers and decision makers, and at least in the college football world, I'd like to think that they are going to do everything in their power to have a season. And I think because the future is unpredictable, tomorrow is unpredictable, let alone 5 months from now. The only thing that I understand from these folks that are behind closed doors talking together that they are putting together contingency plans. You know, if they green light us and everything's good to go in a couple of weeks or a month, business as usual. That's option one. Okay, what if they're pushed back to June or July? Okay, we'll push the season back a month. You know, what about if it goes into the summer? Okay, then we'll start it in December. And more I'm hearing from people, they're willing to go all the way back to the start of like February, March, essentially creating a spring sport.
Right.
And then you would have college football. If it came to this, this would be the last ditch effort. If it came to this, you'd have college football in March and April and May, and bowl games in June.
Wow.
I mean, that's how far they're willing to go to try to salvage the 2020 college football season. I know it's crazy. I know it's weird to think of that, but that would be their last ditch effort if it came to that. That's how far I think they're willing to go. So I don't have any answers. No one has any answers. All I can tell you is they're thinking of every alternative plan that they can come up with to try to do what they can to save the season.
Absolutely. Well, let's take people's minds off COVID-19 for a little bit. I'm sure we're monopolized by it. So let's kind of start from the beginning in terms of you making the leap from being a player to being a broadcaster. You know, there's so many people that want to do it. There's people who try it and don't do it all that well. You've done it amazingly well. Can you walk us through a little bit about that journey for you and how maybe you were able to transcend it in ways that other people can't?
Well, I think what's hard probably for your students to understand and realize is I go all the way back to, I graduated in the spring of '93. I was a business major at Ohio State, marketing major. Thought about the NFL. If I went that route, didn't get drafted, it would have had to have been free agent opportunities. I was just a college football junkie. I wanted to play college football. I wanted to play in the Rose Bowl for Ohio State. As you see, that was like, since I was 5 years old, that's all I cared about. I didn't have that same conviction for playing in the NFL. And so when I got to probably early spring, back then we were on a quarter system, I started to talk to Larry Romanoff, who helped us with, as athletes, he would help us with interviews, you know, because pharmaceutical companies or medical sales or Worthington Industries, a variety of companies would come through the athletic department because they liked the discipline and the commitment of athletes and the sacrifice that they made. And so a lot of people would go through Larry to try to get opportunities for an interview. And I had a number of interviews still in school in like March and April and May, having no idea what my future was. And I had a lot of opportunities. I was offered a job at Worthington Industries. I was offered a job with a pharmaceutical company, all very, very solid opportunities. While I was going through that, I really liked talk radio. I grew up as a teenager in the Dayton, Cincinnati area. I grew up listening to WLW. It was just kind of my thing as a Reds fan. So if you were in my car, everyone else is, listening to music. I was listening to Marty and Joe and Reds baseball. And if I didn't have Marty and Joe and the Reds game on, I was listening to Chris Collinsworth or Andy Furman listening to WLW radio. That was my thing. So the idea that I could maybe do a talk show for myself was always something just in the back of my mind, like almost a dream scenario. So just so happens when I graduated in June, offered these opportunities. WBNS at that time was AM 1460. They kind of did elevator music. They were going to an all sports format and needed a name. I just was a captain the year before and played at Ohio State, and they wanted me to be on the radio show. So I had everybody, whether it's yourself, Nicole, or people listening, at some point in life, you're going to have a fork in the road. And that was a big fork in the road for me. It was stability, pharmaceutical sales, Worthington Industries, big opportunities, didn't sound fun, versus talking sports for an hour and a half every night, making $12,000, no benefits, and coming off of a scholarship check. I was like, man, I'm rich, making $12,000 a year. And so everybody I talked to is 100%. The girl that I dated at the time, I dated a girl for 8 years through high school and college. She's like, you got to take the better job. Parents, everybody, former athletes, everybody told me take the job. No one said take the radio. And you got to realize nowadays you see 30 former Ohio State players on some kind of channel, Big Ten Network, Fox, ESPN, they're everywhere. Back then, there weren't those channels. There weren't those opportunities. There were 0 former Ohio State players on TV, no one. And I didn't even think about being on TV. It wasn't a goal of mine. And so anyway, I took the local radio. I turned down the business opportunities, having no earthly idea what it was going to lead to. But my message to students is I knew I would love it. Like it was my passion. It wasn't work to me. I would do it for free. The fact that they paid me anything was like wow, and they pay me to do this too kind of thing. And it was like I found what I should be doing my whole life, is that kind of feeling. I'd go in, put down a microphone, put my headphones on. I had no idea, I had no training. I was a business major. And I was with Terry Smith, who at the time was the voice of the Buckeyes, and we'd sit there and talk sports. And in Columbus, you got Ohio State, you have the Indians, you have the Browns, you have the Bengals, you have the Reds. I mean, we were talking about everything, which was right up my alley. And that's what I did. And that got my foot in the door. And things changed pretty drastically about 2 years later when I ended up going to ESPN. And that's a whole different story. But that's how I got into the industry.
We have a lot of questions about game day, and I think it's clearly a highlight when you come to Ohio State, and I'm sure everywhere that you go. And so we have a question coming in about how you prepare during game week and how you kind of keep things fresh week after week.
Well, I think the sport does that for you. It keeps it fresh. That's why I love it so much. The college game, it's always evolving. It's always changing. The names and the storylines keep it fresh for you. I think if we did college game day for MLB or the NBA or the NFL, it wouldn't be the show that it is. We could sit here and take bows and talk about how wonderful we are, but to me, that's not what we should be doing. We should be thanking the sport. We should be thanking the fans. We should be thanking the passion that's around college football, because that's why our show has enjoyed the success that it's had. And we, if you notice in the industry today, I have my TV on in my office here, almost every show that you watch, there's people beating on a desk or they're yelling at each other. It almost feels like manufactured discussion or arguments. And with us, it's not that way. We're either going to agree because we agree, or we're going to disagree. But it's not fabricated. It's not pre-produced. It's just comes from the heart. And so that I think is an important thing. And then we all love each other. I know our show, we're very, very fortunate to actually like each other. We'll go to dinner on a Friday night and we like spending time together. And I think any line of work, when you like the people you work with, man, it's going to come across. If you watch Charles Barkley's show on TNT, I think that's the other show that those guys genuinely look like they enjoy hanging out. And they set their egos to the side. And I think that's why the show has had a pretty good run. And the sport, the passion around it, and the fact that the people on the show are unselfish and love working for each other and love seeing the other person have success.
Can you give us, we can only imagine with live television and all those signs behind you and all those fans, anything that sticks in your mind of like the craziest thing that's happened at game day?
I think the craziest thing is just the transition. I started on the show in 1996, and we would have a few hundred people around the set. And it was awesome, and Lee Corso would put on like a silly hat, not a headgear or a mascot head. And that changed at Ohio State. The first time he ever put on the mascot head is at Ohio State. And my wife used to cheer at Ohio State. And when we came to Ohio State one year, they were playing Penn State. This is like 96 or 97. And he asked me to ask Allison, can you find out if I can wear that big Brutus head to put on the show? And I said, what? And I said, yeah, I guess. And I asked Allison. Allison asked, her name was Judy, the coach. And Judy asked the AD, and the AD said, okay. And he puts this Brutus head on and just does this wave. And it was like, I don't know what happened. It just clicked. And then the next week, wherever we were, he did it again. And then it's just obviously been on like a 24 or 25-year run. And the show has just really grown, not just in Columbus, but I mean, literally anywhere we go, you could have 10 or 15,000 people around the set, and they're just fired up about the show being there and their team. And it's just such authentic energy that we never take that for granted. We try to treat our crowd like they're the fifth person on the set. Like that, our crowd has as much to do with our show as the people on the air talking. And I think you can really feel that when you watch our show and how much we appreciate their support for the sport. And, you know, I guess a turning point besides the headgear was probably when Michael Vick was at Virginia Tech. Their head coach really embraced, a guy named Frank Beamer, embraced College Game Day, coming to his campus, and how it kind of officially branded Virginia Tech has arrived in the sport of college football. And he really challenged their fan base to come out to the show. It was a night game, and they put our set inside their stadium, and they opened the stadium up, and there must have been 20,000 people inside that stadium to support the Hokies and Michael Vick. And from that point on, it just seems like every week we go, man, that was the best crowd we've ever had. And then we'll go the next week somewhere and we'll be like, man, that was unbelievable. This was the best crowd we've ever had. And again, we will not take a bow and say it's because of us. We completely give, at least I do, completely give the fans and just the sport and the enthusiasm of the sport all the credit.
You know, in some ways, it feels like it's a blessing and a curse for you to have your Ohio State past. You know, and we know, you know, fairly famously that, you know, one of the reasons you live in Tennessee, it was because of some challenges with how fans react to you not being a homer or, you know, siding with Ohio State. We have quite a few questions about kind of how you balance, you know, Ohio State being what they are to you, you know, how the fact that you have to constantly navigate this minefield that is your past, how do you kind of balance those things?
Well, I'll show you real quick a couple pictures of my office here. There, I don't know if you can see that. There's a picture of my kids. There's a picture of Joey Galloway and me and his kids and my kids at an Ohio State game. There's Urban Meyer with Kenny Chesney and me at a thing. Here's my kids out in Jackson, Wyoming doing the OHIO. Here's my kids doing another OHIO. I mean, it's like, yeah, you really, when you're comfortable in your own skin and like who you are, then people are Nicole, you know, we live in an era where people can create a narrative. They can create a perception because of social media. And because I've kind of a born pleaser, I really struggled with, that was out of my control. And I really struggled with, I wish they really knew how I felt, you know, and every person that blasted me, I wanted to reason with them and try to explain to them, no, I really love the Buckeyes. You don't understand. And I think what happens is, like anything in life, you go through some difficult times and then you just kind of get calloused to it. You just kind of get, your emotions kind of get taken away from you into that particular area. My friends, my family, people close to me, they know how I feel about Ohio State. I mean, there's my family, and then there's Ohio State. Like Ohio State's just like, it's since I was 6 years old, it's been everything to me. And so the fact I was fortunate enough to go and play there, my dad played there. He was a captain. I followed, and I was a captain. My wife cheered at Ohio State. My entire family, they're passionate Ohio State fans. That just because I have to talk objectively about Ohio State, that's my job, you know. And if I could go on the TV and cheer for Ohio State and people would be okay with it, then I would do that. But I think a big part of the reason I've been put in a position that I've been put in at ESPN is because I'm fair, I'm objective, and I just treat Ohio State like I treat Florida State or Texas when I'm on TV. And I feel like 95 to 98% of the people get that and respect that. And there's some people that no matter what you do, you're never going to please. And I think you just have to come to peace with that and just move on. Here's one last thing I'll tell you about this. Most guys you watch on TV, they were 2 or 3 time All-American. They won a Heisman. They won a national championship. They really made a name for themselves as a dominant player. I didn't. And instead of hiding from that, I addressed that early in my career because I knew when I went on College Game Day, people outside of the Big Ten region would say, who's the guy with Corso and Fowler today? They have no idea who I was. And I didn't be embarrassed about that. I thought, you know what? I'm going to make them realize that I'm the hardest working, most prepared analyst on TV. That became my goal. That became my driving force. And so they might not remember me as a player, but they're going to appreciate that, man, he seems like he's done his homework. And this will be my 25th year on College Game Day this fall. And that's still my approach is I look at myself like I'm a scrub. I look at myself like I'm still trying to prove myself. And honestly, I think I'll always look at myself in that way. And so I can't hang my hat on a Heisman at Ohio State. What I try to do is earn people's respect through my hard work and through my preparation. And so I don't think that that really allows me to be a homer. There's some guys that you watch on ESPN or other networks, they have no problem being a homer. But if you notice the guys that have put themselves at a pretty high position to call the biggest games, to be in the biggest studio shows, most of them have decided to be fair and be objective. So that's kind of, I'm at peace with it, but I wish the people, the radicals, if they only knew how much I care about Ohio State, the Blue Jackets, the Reds. I mean, I've been in Nashville for 9 years. The only reason I have DirecTV is so I can watch Fox Sports Ohio, so I can stay up with the Blue Jackets. I can watch the Buckeyes. I can watch the Reds. I mean, that's the beauty of that for me is it's like being at home for me because I never will change my allegiance to those teams. At Ohio State basketball, Chris Holtmann, he's never going to find a bigger fan than me. So that's who I am. That's like it or not. But on the air, I'm going to be fair. That's just the way it is.
Well, it's not a football question, but what are you watching on Netflix during this binge-worthy time?
I'm going to be honest with you. If we put aside COVID-19, people losing their lives, the nurses, the doctors, the EMS, all the things that are way more important in life, right? If you just put that to the side, because I know that's the biggest priority. Outside, when you talk about living your daily life, I really miss sports. I mean, I've always loved sports, but like, I mean, I'm watching the 1986 Red Sox Mets, you know, like I am dying for sports. Like I always knew I loved sports, but man, I have a whole new appreciation for how much I love sports. And I'll watch anything too. If it's live, I'll watch anything. So taking that away from me, that represents 99% of what I typically would watch. I've been on Ozark. I just finished season 3, and I wish Jason Bateman would like do season 4 right now. Like I'm all about Ozark. Been watching, you know, just with the kids, we'll try to watch different movies. You know, some of them are old school movies that, whether it's like Disney movies or whatever it might be, but we're kind of bouncing around. But as far as binge watching, Ozark was definitely the one that I've been working through the most. And I'm open to suggestions, by the way, Nicole. You guys, if you have any, I've got my pen, so please let me know.
You guys, it's a challenge sent out to you, so send them out and we'll send them on to Kirk.
Yeah,
We've had a couple people ask if there's truth to the rumor that you might be making the jump to Monday Night Football.
Well, it's been brought up. Again, going back, I've already told you a little bit about my career. I'm a college football guy. I probably have more passion for high school football than I do the NFL. I like the NFL, but I like, at this point in my life, I like watching the guys that I covered in college play in the NFL. And I watch it on Sundays. I'm not saying I don't, but I would never, ever leave college football to go to Monday Night Football. I would do it in addition, like it would be a challenge. It's already a challenge to do game day and then a game every Saturday night. Most people in our industry don't do two things like that. I would do game day, a game on Saturday and Monday night if they would want me to do that. But I will not say, hey, Kirk, will you leave college and come to Monday? That's not an option for me. So as I sit here right now, I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing for about the last, like I said, 25 years now.
Colin, you have some questions you've been monitoring?
Yeah. First, thanks again for coming into this, Kirk. We have a question here about, managing, connecting with family, especially during the season, and how you balance that personal life with your professional life on the road.
Great question, Colin. Honestly, it was tougher for me when I first started at ESPN because I used to do a Thursday night game with Mike Tirico and Lee Corso. So I would leave my house on Tuesday to go get ready for the Thursday game. And then I would call the Thursday night game. And then I would get up Friday morning from wherever we were and fly to the game day site. And then I'd be there Friday and Saturday. And then I'd get up on Sunday and get back, early afternoon on Sunday. And you do that for 15 to 18 weeks. That's a pretty long season. And then back in 2006, they approached me and asked me to give up the Thursday night game and move to just a Saturday night primetime game along with the game day show. And so that allowed me then to start leaving town on Thursday, and then I get back early Sunday morning. So that's become much better. But I've always tried to be very vigilant and aware of the importance of my family. I've tried, probably to a fault, of just trying to be there and be in conversation. And I never wanted to be the guy or the dad that your kids are talking and they're saying, and you're texting while you're at the dinner table, or you're one ear, yeah, that's great. You're not really listening. When I'm there, I try to really do my best to really be there. And then when I'm in this room right now, like I am, and I'm doing something like this with you, or as soon as I get done with you guys, I'm going to call my producer for the draft. So I try to, when I'm outside of this room, I'm dad and I'm hanging out and let's do some stuff. And when I'm in this room, I try to just, do my best to get ready for whatever it is I'm getting ready for, whether it's a game or game day or the draft or whatever it might be.
Kind of along the same lines, we had someone wondering what your experience was this year, calling games with your sons on the sideline and what that was like.
Yeah, that was, again, if they were out, I remember when Brian Greasy was playing at Michigan, and he eventually became the starter, and Bob was calling the games. I never talked to Bob or Brian about that, but that's a very, very different animal from, I think people tried to make a little bit more out of that for me than there really was. It was cool, to be honest with you, the fact that my kids have battled and decided that instead of going to a small school, they wanted to try to go to a bigger school. And God bless them for wanting to do that. And Dabo gave them that opportunity to be a preferred walk-on, both of them at Clemson, and they took advantage of that. And a lot of people said, well, why aren't they at Ohio State? And the reason is Clemson asked them to be a preferred walk-on, and if Ohio State would have asked them to do that, I don't know, you'd have to ask my twins. They probably would have gone to Ohio State. But they went to a summer camp leading up to their senior year and did well enough to make Dabo kind of be like, okay, these guys can play. And thought that they needed a year to redshirt and develop and get stronger. And so last year they were redshirting, but they were on the team and in uniform. They dressed for every home game. They dressed for all their the semifinal game, the ACC championship, the national championship. And to be honest with you, it's pretty cool to see my school on one sideline in a semifinal game And to see my kids in uniform on the other sideline, it wasn't to a point where, man, I feel really torn. How am I going to do this? It wasn't anything like that. But it was something like in the pregame when I was down on the field. You know, I always go down to the field, you know, an hour, half hour before kick, and go down and talk to coaches, and to see my boys, you know, doing backpedal drills or catching balls. And on the one side, I see the Buckeyes, and that was kind of like bring a tear to your eye kind of moment. But other than that, you know, I kind of walked up, and now 3 years from now, 4 years from now, if they're actually out on the field contributing, that'll be, you know, a totally different thing. And that'd be something I would love to have to deal with. But this past year, it was more of just unbelievable, memorable night. Very sad for Ohio State the way it ended, because I thought they played well enough, obviously, to win the game. Quick story about that is I got done calling the game. Now, when I tell you my family is Ohio State fans, my youngest is basically me. His name's Chase. He's in 7th grade. He loves Ohio State to a point, like whether it's you guys watching or you have a relative or a son or a younger brother. I mean, it's everything. The Blue Jackets, the Reds, Buckeyes, it's everything. And they lost. And here his brothers are on the Clemson team, and he's bawling, crying. And I went down into the locker room to go tell Ryan Day just how proud I was of him and what an incredible season he had. I mean, first time as a head coach, replacing Urban Meyer, and he has Ohio State on the brink of maybe having one of their best seasons in history, and that's his first year. I just wanted to go down there, not just because of the way the game ended. I just wanted to hug him and tell him congratulations. I've become pretty good friends with him. And I got down there, and he was pretty fired up about, you know, not some of the calls and whatnot. And you know, and I think he felt he could be honest with me, and he's just, you know, laying into me about it and almost just like airing it out. And, hey, Theo, no. And he does what he's doing. Then I turn around and I see Chase just outside of the locker room doors. And again, he's crying really hard. And J.K. Dobbins was in there with just his game pants on, kind of staring at the ground. And it was just such an emotional moment to see all that, and then go out there and hug Chase. And then J.K. Dobbins came over and hugged him, and Robert Landers came over and hugged him. And I'm like, man, this is, you know, life's about memories, and it's about moments. And that was a tough night, but for me, it'll be a night I'll always remember, you know, and love to see Ohio State win the game. But just because of that moment at the end of the game was special for me, on just to see those players. Here they are, they lose a game like that, and I didn't say, hey, do you mind? They just saw that he was struggling. That was powerful. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, I have to ask you then, what's your call on the interception, not interception?
Well, the same thing I said during the game. Somebody needs to this day teach me the rule, because we have a professional that's up in the booth with us, and he's a very, very good official, Bill Lamonier, and he's a former Big Ten official. And as soon as it happened, I thought, scoop, score, touchdown, Ohio State. And then when they started to review it, and I said, basically where I come from, that's 4 steps. That's a fumble, right? And then he said, Kirk, I have to disagree with you. He said that to me. This is before the crew said anything. And I was like, what? Then basically explained to me, that's 4 steps. And he said, well, he has to make a football move. And I'm like, football move, 4 steps is not a football move. And to this day, I've talked with 7 or 8 different officials and gotten 3 or 4 or 5 different answers. So that's a rule I think they really need to figure out, because I think every one of us that watched thought that's a touchdown. And all the other ones were actually fine. I mean, the fumble or the drop pass, you know, when who was it that lowered his head and made the targeting call?
Oh, Shaun Wade.
Shaun Wade, who's a great player. We don't have to like the rule, but the rule is if a defensive player lowers his head and shows the crown of his helmet and hits a player, it doesn't matter if he hits him in the stomach or where he hits him. It's more about the defensive player, the crown of the head. And so by rule, that was actually the right call. But the fumble, the scoop and score, which to me ended up determining the outcome of the game, I still don't understand how that was overruled.
You're right in line with the rest of the city of Columbus too. So.
But I think honestly, if you were watching Texas play USC and that happened to Texas, I think you guys would all still say, "What? How did that happen?" I mean, so I don't think that's just being, of course, Ohio State fans probably think that Dobbins held onto the ball, this, and they probably think they were all bad calls. But I'm just telling you, even if you're a Michigan fan and you watch that, you probably are still thinking, how is it not a fumble? So I don't think that's a bias thing. I think that's more of, somebody please tell me how this rule works, because I don't understand it.
Absolutely. Colin?
So Kirk, you saw obviously in the playoff this past year 3 transfer quarterbacks, and the transfer portal with basketball this week, but football as well is just getting so much talk on social media, things like that. How in general do you think that will affect college football in the long run, and maybe some things that come out of it?
So, I'm sorry, the beginning of that part, you kind of cut out on me. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Just how do you think that the transfer portal affects college football, in the long run?
I have kind of mixed views on that. I think that it is what it is, right? We have to embrace it. There are a lot of things that happen in college athletics, and it's like bowl games not mattering. I could sit there and pound the desk and say, you guys need to understand, like Rose Bowl, it matters. You guys need to care. But it's a generation of fans and more importantly players that they're looking at things through a different lens, right? So this whole transfer portal, I remember when it first started, I was really against it, and I still have some reservations against it. I think it's an individual case-by-case study. I don't think you can throw a blanket over top of that and say all transfers are great or all transfers are terrible. I personally, I'll give you a quick story, and the reason I have reservations. I came into Ohio State as a 5-star, can't miss, 4-year starter, guaranteed, can't wait to get him, and I fell flat on my face. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't believe I was dressing in the Ohio State locker room. I couldn't believe that they let me in there, even though I was a 5-star, because of the way I was raised. Ohio State, it was like Batman was over there and Superman was down there and Aquaman was over there. Like I was in Disneyland. I couldn't believe that I was in the Ohio State locker room. It took me a year or two to kind of get over that. Not to mention I was an option guy trying to learn how to sit in a pocket and play a pro-style offense. So it took me some time. And so my inclination as an 18 or 19-year-old was like, screw this, I'm out of here. I'm going to transfer. And my dad said, no, you're not. No. And so I listened to my dad. I kept working, kept competing, kept working on, he can't throw. So I worked extra hard on throwing. And I finally got to a point, my junior, especially my senior year, where I was able to go out and contribute and play and did fine. And I tell you, staying with Ohio State and graduating from Ohio State and going through that adversity and not things not going my way and me being frustrated and wanting to leave or go play baseball was my other option. And yet fighting through the adversity to get to the other side of that and becoming a 22 or 23-year-old on the back end of that, I became a very different person, and it allowed me to learn a lot about myself because I had to fight through that. So when I see guys today in this new era that are like, first sign of trouble, I got beat out, I'm out of here. I just reflect and I think back to, man, I wonder what my life would have been like if my dad just said, okay, you want to quit? Quit. And again, I'm not saying there's some kids that shouldn't do it, but I just think you're taking some power away from the coaches that have to do some tough love sometimes on some immature, whether it's an immature kid, an undisciplined kid, a kid that can't get out of his own way. Sometimes a coach is going to say some things to that kid and make him do some things in order for him to learn valuable life lessons that he may not agree with. And if his response right now is, coach isn't fair, he's not being nice to me, I'm out of here. Are we really teaching these kids life lessons? I mean, it's not just always about the NFL. It's not just always about that, to me. It's about trying to teach these guys about the bigger picture of trying to become a better person. And to become a better person, sometimes you got to go through some rough waters to get there. And I think for you to immediately abort when things get tough or don't go your way, I don't think that's helping these kids in the long run.
Well, 6 years into the playoff, what do you think about expansion?
I think it's inevitable now, man. I think as we sit here in the middle of this virus and we have no idea where football will be in the fall, or if it's going to go to the spring, or are we going to play 9 conference games, or how many games are we going to play? I think the conference commissioners and I think the ADs are starting to realize, finances are going to get really tight for everybody, everywhere in every industry. But specifically to answer your question, one way that they might be able to generate more revenue is to expand the playoffs. So they may in the past say, no, we're going to stick with 4, even though I think 8 was inevitable. And I think now, there's a real chance that this thing could go to 8, it could go to 12, it could even go to 16. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, when that'll happen, I have no idea. But I really believe that we are headed towards that, more towards that than, it's going to be 4. They're not going to give in. I think it's going to expand. I just don't know when it's going to be, but I think it's inevitable that it's going to happen.
Well, it seems like kind of the trio of issues seems to be playoff expansion, the transfer portal, and then paying players. Do you think we'll see college football and the NCAA in general go that direction? Maybe something in between, or what are your thoughts on that?
Paying players?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the name, image, and likeness will happen. I know Gene Smith's heavily involved in that group and trying to put together some ideas. And I can't think of a better guy to be able to talk to folks and try to bring like minds together to try to come up with some answers. He's as good as there is. And so I'm looking forward to, whenever that is, whenever he gets back with the NCAA and kind of comes up with his ideas. I can't wait to hear what that'll be. But I think that's inevitable. But paying players versus name, image, and likeness are 2 very different things. Name, image, and likeness is probably going to impact, even at a school like Ohio State, how do you police that? Is it just the quarterback? Is it the receiver? Is the left guard getting any money? How do you police it, if you police it at all? Are agents going to be lining up Justin Fields on a Tuesday night to go to a car dealership to sign autographs, on a Tuesday, and he's got to play Illinois on Saturday? I mean, is it players do whatever they want to do kind of thing? So I think they have to have some parameters to it. But paying players would be a very, very different thing, where you're talking about and by the way, their scholarship check is out there. Some qualify for a Pell Grant. Cost of attendance is out there. I mean, the one thing when we talk about this that I really feel very, very against is this image or the portrayal that these poor athletes, they don't have any way to eat, or they don't have any money to go to a movie or anything like that. Now, we're in the middle of a virus and things are very different, players away from campus. But under normal circumstances, unless a player is just blowing his money, he gets a scholarship check, or he gets a Pell Grant check, or he gets cost of attendance and just goes to the mall and just buys a bunch of stuff and just goes crazy. There are guys that do that. But if they're being responsible, they should have plenty of money. Money should not be a problem for them based on what they're receiving. Even though if you listen to social media, you think that these guys are broke and it's unfair. It's furthest from the truth, in my opinion. So I think they'll get there, but it's a very, very, as we know, tricky question. And Title IX gets involved in that. And you just play the football players. It's not as simple as people think.
We're getting quite a few questions, just to transfer back to game day a little bit, about where your favorite places to go are for game day. Any specific locations you like to go back to, and someone's asking about a place that you haven't been yet that you hope you'll see game day go to.
Well, the obvious answer, not just because I'm on here, whenever I get asked this, they usually say, besides Ohio State, is there anywhere else you like to go back to? Because I always love coming back to Columbus, and the passion there is obviously crazy, and every year we go back. It's one of our favorite stops. Outside of Ohio State, in the Big Ten, I think Penn State has always been a great one. We typically go to Penn State for the whiteout, and I know if you go to the whiteout as a visitor, it's not a lot of fun. But if you're just like going there to watch a game, to me, it's a pretty cool scene, right? And I think their students are as good as there is, in the country. They're very, very dedicated and very organized on how they support their team, and they come out to game day with all their white on. So that's a fun one. Eugene, Oregon is a really good spot. Very passionate fans out west. Washington State, we went to a couple years ago. Incredible. We always have a Washington State flag, Old Crimson, that's traveled around for years and years to the show, no matter where we are. And we ended up going there a couple years ago. That was an incredible stop. And in the SEC, Baton Rouge, if you've never been to Baton Rouge, that's a really, really special place to go. Auburn can be a great spot. Georgia in Athens is a fun one. And I'll tell you, we've been pretty much everywhere at this point. We checked 3 or 4 off last year that we had never been to. So I wish Falika the Bear were here, because there's like 4 or 5 more that we still need to make it to. That he would know. Maybe I can text him and he can remind me, but there's not one that jumps out in the top of my head that we've not been to that I'm looking forward to going to yet. And we go to a lot of times, we'll go to small schools too. We've been to the MAC, we've been to North Dakota State. Last year went to South Dakota State. I mean, we sometimes try to spread the wealth and let other people have an opportunity. And those shows have been a lot of fun too when we go to the smaller schools.
Absolutely. We had at SSI, we had a great conversation last week with Rick Spielman about the draft. And we have a question here about the draft and what your thoughts are about the challenges in terms of broadcasting a socially distant event like that, and to expand it a little bit, what's going to be the effect on some of these players that maybe have been limited in being able to work out for teams and get exposed in the way they would have normally?
Yeah, we just had a meeting yesterday about the broadcasts. It's going to be very, very different, not just because Roger Goodell is going to be in his basement by himself, right, announcing the players, but as he announces the players, Joe Burrow is going to be, on a either like we all are right now with his family, and then they're going to have cameras inside the war rooms to be able to show that. It's going to be a very memorable draft. When they first said that the draft was going to go on, I was very surprised, as we deal with this, the curve, and are we on the back end or what's going on? And I thought, man, I don't know. But I think everybody's really looking forward to just having something to get excited about and to watch. And I think when you watch it, just so you know, ESPN will do the traditional Mel Kiper draft where they're breaking down, the Browns need a left guard, and, here's the guys on the board. It's strictly NFL and NFL evaluation. Last year in Nashville here, we did the ABC, and Robin Roberts came over from Good Morning America, and she would throw to a vignette. It was like 45 seconds to a minute, and it told you a little bit about the player and the person. And then you had myself and Corso and Dez and Pollock and Reese and Rinaldi and all these guys, and we were talking more about, hey, our experience of covering this guy in college is this. So we really gave a college slant to the draft, and the success was, I think, very surprising to the NFL, and so they want us to come back this year and do it again. So if you watch this year, if you like the traditional draft of breaking down what the teams need and the NFL perspective, you're going to go to ESPN or go to ESPN. And if you want more of the college version, then you'll go to ABC. So it's two completely different shows, but it'll be memorable one way or another. You know, we're still in the college show. We're going to still show Goodell. She'll still show the picks, and then just kind of break down the players as it goes on. But it's I'm looking forward. We're going to have a really long rehearsal on Wednesday, which we don't usually do, but I think it's just to try to work the logistics out of it, try to figure it out. I'm sure there's going to be a few glitches along the way, but we just hope that this helps people at home enjoy something besides Ozark or whatever you're binge watching, gives them something live to watch.
So we have a lot of questions about your most memorable or your favorite experiences. So one starts certainly with Ohio State. So do you remember a game that you played in Ohio State that stuck out for you as a player?
Probably my senior year, our third game of the year. My first two games my senior year, and I was a captain. We had a very talented team, but we just were not clicking. And our second game, we played Bowling Green, and we just barely beat them. And we lost like 5 starters to injuries. Joey Galloway, my good buddy, and our best receiver was out for the year. He tore his ACL, and we just barely limped out of that game with a win. And we even got booed off of the field from some of the fans. And so the next week we were going to Syracuse, and they were a top 5 team in the country. And if you listen to all the media and everybody, we were supposed to lose by 3 or 4 touchdowns based on the way we had looked. And it was another one of those typical big, slow Big Ten teams against a fast Syracuse team. And, you know, being doubted really brought our team together. And we went off on them, scored on the first drive. A guy named Robert Smith, who was a very talented running back, came back from cracked ribs the week before. A guy named Eddie George, who won the Heisman Trophy, was a freshman that year. He had 3 touchdowns in that game, and we actually ended up blowing them out. And I just remember learning such a valuable lesson about emotion and how one week you feel doubted and it's us against the world, and how you feel like you can beat anybody. And then the next week you're kind of, this team's not any good. We can just show up and win, and how vulnerable you can be. So I really learned a lot of lessons that year about kind of the roller coaster ride and how challenging it is to try to stay at a certain level for an entire season. But that game really stands out to me because so many people doubted us, including our own fans, when we went into that game.
How about the best game you've ever called?
Oh my gosh.
Or a favorite?
Well, sentimentally, it's funny. The 2014 season and the Ohio State-Oregon National Championship was a very, obviously Ohio State won the national championship, but because of my ongoing battle with people and being fair, and it's like, it was very weird. I was very professional for the week leading up to the game. Ohio State had beaten Alabama the week before. Oregon had beaten Florida State. Now here they go, Marcus Mariota and the Ducks against Ohio State. Very professional, very professional. Anybody had ever talked to me, I was just being who I am. Get into the game, call the game, very professional. And then with about 30 seconds to go, Zeke Elliott scored like a last touchdown to really put the game away. And then as the clock was going down, I don't even know where it came from. I don't know, maybe it was, just all this idea about me not being an Ohio State fan and knowing who I am. I literally fell to a knee and started bawling, crying like a 10-year-old. And Fowler's still talking, and he looks over at me, and it's from what my buddy told me. He sees me, and I take my mic up, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm just like, and we're live on the air. So that game stands out to me. I finally regrouped after about 30 seconds, but I was just happy for them. It was such a great team, and a team that was, remember that was the year JT Barrett got hurt, and Braxton Miller got hurt at the beginning of the year, and then JT gets hurt against Michigan, and Cardale Jones comes in, and they beat Wisconsin. It was just, there was so much. I just love the story And I loved how that team carried themselves. They were very, very sharp in the way they went about their business. So I was just happy for them, everything they had overcome. So that one stands out. But do you remember when Tua came in at halftime against Georgia? Alabama was losing. They couldn't do anything right with Jalen Hurts. And Nick Saban and the national championship down, like, I think it was 14-3. He goes to a kid named Tua Tagovailoa, who was a freshman, who really hadn't played much other than mop-up duty, and he hands him the reins in the second half in the national championship and brings them back. And the fact that Kirby Smart, who used to coach for Nick Saban, is now the coach at Georgia, his alma mater, goes into overtime, and looks like Alabama's going to lose because Tua gets sacked. And the next play, he hits a touchdown bomb and clinched the game on the last play. That was, that was one that really stands out to me as well. There's been so many, but that one's another good one. Oh, one last one. Yeah. 2006, Ohio State, Michigan, number 1 against number 2. Bo Schembechler, who was a family friend of ours, had died on the Friday before that game. And it's Ohio State number 1. Michigan number 2. Bo passes away, and I'll never forget the class by Ohio State did a really nice tribute to Bo, like a moment of silence, the scoreboard. It was not, the way you see on social media, cussing. It was like, no, we're going to take a step away from that trash and show you what this rivalry is really about. I just remember being in the broadcast booth with Brent Musburger, just being really proud of how Ohio State handled that. And then it was a great game. Went down to the last few seconds, and Ohio State ended up winning it and clinching a chance to go to the national title game. So that one really stands out too.
So we just have a couple minutes left. You said something really profound before, and you said it so impactfully, how much you miss sports. And I know the other day, the Blue Jackets, when they beat Tampa, they were replaying those games, and just the sound of hockey just was like an endorphin rush for me. What would you say to people who are in the same boat as you are, who are just like, I miss sports and this is so meaningful for me. And every other point in our lives, we've gone to sports to make us feel better. Yeah. And now we don't have it. What would you say to those people?
Well, I try to tell myself the same thing. I think, number one, stay safe and keep your family safe through this. Listen to these guidelines. It's a scary, it's on one hand, you think you worry about your parents or your grandparents or whoever it might be. On the other hand, you hear people who are in their 20s that for whatever reason, they were healthy and it attacked them and brought them down. I had a buddy that lives in Columbus who's a dentist, George Zagurnis, and he battled for 14 days and thankfully came through it, but it's attacking people at very different ages. So number one, I would just say, let's all just follow the guidelines and be safe. And what I think is, again, we've never faced anything like this. We always come back stronger when we go through something like this as a society, as a country. And I think what I keep hoping is when we get through this, not when, it's a matter of weeks, months, whenever this is going to be, is we're going to have such gratitude. You just talked about, you turned on Jeff Remmer and Jody, and you're listening to that hockey game. The first game 1 was insane. Like, there's 1 seed against an 8. We're down 3-0 in Tampa. It's like, oh well, it's, and then we freaking come back and win. It's like, and even though I watched that, I watched it live. I watched it yesterday, and it was like I'd never seen the game before. I was going crazy. By the way, how much do we miss Panarin, right? He's so freaking amazing how he sets goals up. But I just think, man, we're going to have a new appreciation. We're going to come back better. We're going to come back stronger. And we just got to get through it, And the tough thing is we don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know if we're going to watch sports. I guess golf may happen in June. We don't know if baseball is going to happen with nobody in the stands. We don't know if we're going to have football in the fall. But eventually we're going to get back, right? And we just got to hang our hat on that and look forward to those days when it comes. And in the meantime, get into your routine at home and enjoy your family and make the most out of your situation, as challenging as that can be some days.
Kirk Herbstreit, we are so privileged to have spent this time with you. Thank you so much for being here. And we wish you and your family all the best. We certainly hope we see you on the air soon and we see you back in Columbus just as soon.
Yeah.
And everyone, please visit us at sportsandsociety.osu.edu, where we're going to have more speakers. We're going to have more events. We're going to keep us all going, and we're going to keep sports in our lives because we know how important it is to everybody. But I'm sure we're sending a virtual applause to you, Kirk, and I just thank you so much for all of your time and your insights.
Yeah, thank you so much. Congratulations on putting this together. Your students and the alumni are very lucky to have this. It's like you said, it's challenging times, but it's moments like this, all these great guests you're able to put on. What a special thing. So thank you for doing this. And anytime you need anything, just let me know.
Awesome. I definitely will. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.